Coming up, the rooftop protest attempting to halt exports of weaponry to Israel.
Who could be the latest millionaire? A person who has until Christmas to claim on his or her lottery ticket.
And back on the road after 16 years, Jasper Carrott with a few of his mates. That's ITV Central at 6. Tonight, the rooftop protesters out to stop a weapons factory exporting to Israel. That's next.
The national and international news is on the way after the news where you are now on ITV.
Welcome to ITV News Central. On our programme tonight, the anti-war protest at a firm accused of supplying weapons to Israel.
The plan at the moment is to continue to communicate with the protesters in order, as I say, to come to some kind of peaceful resolution as quickly as possible.
Lights out. The Midlands switches off to mark the 100th anniversary of the First World War.
Why Father Christmas is helping to hunt out a mystery £1 million lottery winner.
And the carrot is back on the road. Why? I tell all later on.
Good evening. A protest group has closed down a factory it claims is helping build weapons which are then supplied to Israel. The protesters scaled the UAV engines building in Shenstone near Lichfield this morning.
It's remained closed all day, with police having to divert traffic around the area. The protesters say they're calling on the UK to stop arming Israel and will stay as long as is necessary to get their message across. Our reporter Lee Comley has been following the protest today and joins us now. Lee, what is the situation at the moment?
Well, the protest continues in pretty much the same fashion as it has done all day. A group of 9 protesters are on the roof there behind me. Another group of protesters have joined us this evening just beyond a police cordon that's to the side of me just here. But the protesters on that roof over there say they have tents and supplies and are willing to stay up there as long as it takes. They started first thing this morning. At 5 a.m, protesters took over the roof of the UAV engines factory in Shenstone in Lichfield, and that's where they've remained all day. The name of the business might reveal why. It's a factory that makes engines which are used in UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones. It's owned by Israeli drone manufacturer Elbit. The protest group says parts made here are being used in weapons that kill Palestinians. The Israelis argue that drones are used to combat threats from Hamas. Earlier I spoke to one of the 9 protesters and asked why they decided to take action in this way.
We want to see this place shut down. We don't believe that any company has the right to export terror in this way and aid and abet war crimes. We want an immediate embargo on all arms exports to Israel. It's clear Israel's committing crimes against humanity.
The protesters are from the London Palestine Action Group, and they say they're in it for the long haul. They put it with today's wet weather and say they have enough supplies and food to last all week. Police and fire crews have been speaking to them all day, attempting to try and bring the situation to a close.
The plan at the moment is to continue to communicate with the protesters in order, as I say, to come to some kind of peaceful resolution as quickly as possible, so as not to disrupt the community any more than absolutely necessary.
So far, the protesters have achieved their goal. UAV engines has remained closed all day, and until the group decides to move, that looks likely to continue.
Lee, has the company made any comment about this protest?
Well, we have tried all day to get in contact with UAV Engines and their parent company, Elbit, to try and put the protesters' allegations to them. But unfortunately, we've had no response via phone or via email, and we will continue to endeavour to get a statement from them. But the business, as I said, has remained closed all day. The police was in contact with the managing director this morning and advised them to remain closed for safety reasons because of the protest on the roof. And as long as that protest continues, that business will remain closed.
Lee, thank you for that report. A man's been jailed for trying to hire a hitman to kill his wife. Graham Burgess agreed to pay £10,000 to a man he thought was a hitman in what was an undercover operation. Staffordshire Police became aware of the 45-year-old's plans and deployed a police officer posing as a contract killer. Officers arrested Burgess as he waited at home, believing that the murder had been carried out. He was jailed for 6 years.
It's emerged that a light aircraft narrowly missed crashing into the rooftops of a housing estate near Gloucestershire Airport. The pilots managed to gain altitude after clipping 2 trees near the edge of the Staverton airfield.
An eyewitness says she was terrified her house was about to be hit by the plane. Our correspondent Ken Goodwin reports.
A Piper aeroplane like this one clipped the top of a tree just yards from a housing estate. Mary White thought it was going to hit her house. It was so close that the twigs and leaves the plane shaved from the treetop ended up in her garden.
I looked out of the bedroom window and I could see the aircraft coming towards me fairly low. I thought it was going to hit the house. It made a rustling sound, obviously by the tree, and then passed over and quickly went to the front of the house and saw it gaining height over the houses opposite. I was terrified, yeah. I mean, you just freeze on the spot.
It happened just after the plane, with 2 passengers on board, had taken off from Gloucestershire Airport. The light aircraft suffered an engine problem, lost height and narrowly avoided houses in Warren Close in nearby Churchdown as the pilot struggled to regain control. Just to give you some idea of the scale involved, this is the tree that the aeroplane clipped, and just a few feet over here is Mrs. White's house. A few more metres over there is the rest of the estate, and about 100 metres over there is a children's playground. Just down the road, Dawn Garfield was watching from her living room window and saw the plane clip more trees as it came in over the golf course and then over the park.
I pulled the curtain back, looked out and saw this little plane coming lower and lower and lower, and obviously you could almost see it trying to go up, but it wasn't, it was coming down, and finally it hit through the middle bit of the big trees behind me.
The near miss has led to calls from local people for stricter controls on where pilots can fly.
Looking at Google Maps, maybe he was heading for the Imogen Barrack Sports Field, but there's a lot of houses in between him and it, and frankly I don't believe he should have been where he was. Well, the tree's barely higher than the house, so he's very lucky to get away with it. Another 20 feet, he'd have been into the housing estate. There'd been no way out of that one at all.
Gloucestershire Airport says no one was injured in the incident and denies that pilots are flying too low or deviating from agreed take-off and landing patterns.
The aircraft was able to, or the pilot was able to recover the power to the engine and effect a safe landing back to the airport.
Can you reassure people who are worried that one day there will be a serious accident?
Absolutely not. We handle around 80,000 movements a year very, very safely, and there are very, very strict rules and regulations that are encountered for all flying.
The incident, which happened just over 2 weeks ago, has been reported to the Department of Transport's Air Accident Investigation Branch. Ken Goodwin, ITV News, Churchdown.
2 teenagers have been charged in connection with a fire which destroyed a double-decker bus. The National Express bus was allegedly set on fire in the Spark Brook area of Birmingham in June. Police have charged 2 16-year-olds with setting the vehicle on fire. 2 adults from Small Heath have also been charged with perverting the course of justice and will appear before magistrates later this month.
Hereford United Football Club's first home match of the opening season in the Southern League could be in doubt over continuing safety concerns. The club has failed to get a safety certificate, which means their fixture against St Neots Town on Saturday at Edgar Street is uncertain. Hereford hasn't been able to play matches at home because of safety concerns from Herefordshire Council. The club say it'll happily reapply for the certificate on Thursday.
Plans for a new £25 million tower in the centre of Leicester have been drawn up by developers. The 15-storey building will contain shops, apartments and a sports store and a rooftop football pitch. A planning application for the former All Saints brewery site on Vaughan Way near High Cross Shopping Centre has been submitted to the council.
The Leicester University scientist who discovered DNA fingerprinting has won the oldest scientific prize in Britain. Sir Alec Jeffreys will receive the Edinburgh Medal more than 30 years after his discovery. He'll get the prize in April next year.
An artist from the Midlands has created a field of ceramic poppies to remember all the British and Commonwealth soldiers who were killed during the First World War.
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry officially opened the art installation at the Tower of London this morning. The ceramic poppies were created by Paul Cummins at his studio in Derby. Volunteers have spent the past 2 weeks planting 120,000 poppies. Almost 900,000 will be planted in total, with the last one laid on Armistice Day on November the 11th.
People in Derby are really quite passionate, especially if they break one of them, because they realise it could actually be a person they're breaking. So they're really quite passionate what happens.
If we sell them all, and I'm sure we will, we could raise upwards of £12 to £15 million for service charities. And I think those who we remember, who lost their lives 100 years ago, would be so delighted that not only are we remembering them, but actually the proceeds from that remembrance goes to help wounded, injured and sick from Iraq and Afghanistan and more modern conflicts. I think it comes together in a wonderful way.
Well, meanwhile, of course, commemorations to mark a century since the start of the war continued last night as thousands across the West Midlands took part in a national Lights Out event.
Public buildings, businesses and households were asked to turn off their lights for an hour and to leave a single candle burning. At 11 o'clock, the exact moment war was declared, those final candles were put out. Callum Watkinson reports.
In Birmingham Cathedral last night, music, prayer, poetry,
"To the last man," cried the profiteers.
And silence, and a switch off of the lights inspired by some prophetic words. The lamps are going out all over Europe, said the Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey, the day before Britain went to war in 1914. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime.
This evening is an opportunity for us to invite people to come along and pause and reflect and think about the significance of the events 100 years ago.
A projector showed Westminster Abbey's service, and there were candles, extinguished one by one as the official declaration time approached. By 11 o'clock, the congregation here felt something of the darkness that the Foreign Secretary saw coming a century ago.
I think I'm just quietly appalled, really, and completely lacking in understanding. I've sort of read up about the First World War and tried to understand how it started, and I can't get my head around it. I think that's in common with a lot of people. And I think I'm just confused.
It's given me a lot more appreciation for things I didn't really know about. I think it's really important that people do know what has happened in times gone past.
It's something that we should never forget. It's something that's happened to our country. It's something that's so important that we keep in our memories, that our children remember. And let's just hope that everybody does.
The same ritual was repeated in public buildings round the country. In private houses too, many sent us pictures to show they sat in the shadows and remembered for a while. As thousands across the West Midlands reflected on millions of lives cut short.
We monitored the usage on the network last night from 10 o'clock, and we saw a significant drop in the usage profile of 55 megawatts. And that actually equates to 5 million low energy light bulbs, which we can directly equate to the Lights Out initiative.
Sir Edward Grey never did see the lamps go on again in Europe. By the time the armistice was signed, old age had all but robbed him of his sight, and the war all but destroyed the Europe that he knew. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.